Constituyente y Reforma a la Constitución. Estamos acá con un gran invitado y una gran comentarista, el profesor Richard Albert de la Universidad de Texas. Hi Richard, thank you for being here. Y también la profesora Luisa Fernanda García de la Universidad del Rosario. Hemos querido invitar a Richard porque pues es uno de los profesores que más ha investigado el tema de la reforma constitucional y el poder constituyente recientemente. Él es profesor canadiense, su madre es de origen, es de haitiana y ahorita está en la Universidad de Texas. Es pues un investigador que ha revolucionado, digamos, el tema de la reforma constitucional. Se han hecho algunas traducciones de sus textos en la Universidad Externado, por ejemplo, Formas y Función de la Enmienda Constitucional. Y que hicieron de editores con Carlos Bernal Pulido, Cambio Constitucional Informal. Pero ahora vamos a hacer la presentación de su libro Constitutional Amendments, Making, Breaking and Changing Constitution, que publicó este año. Y Luisa pues es doctora en Derecho de la Universidad de Montpellier y profesora de la Universidad de Rosario. Y la invitamos porque conoce mucho la obra de Richard, es su amiga, y creo que hay en un reciente libro sobre comentarios o un simposio que se hizo en Brasil sobre el texto de Richard Albert que va a presentar, pues ella comentó. Thank you, Richard, for being here. So we have like 40 minutes, more or less, or 50, as you want. You're talking about your book. After that, we have some comments related with your book and remarks from Luisa. And Luisa is going to do it in English, and she's going to translate it into Spanish. After that, we are going to have a question from the public, the people who can speak English, so can make the question in English, and after that, translate the question. And Maria Camila is going to translate your answer. So that is more or less what the methodology. And thank you also, and thank you again for being here. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. May I ask a question before we begin? Is it possible for me to have co-host privileges so I can share my screen?
Yes, I think so. Manuela, que si puedes permitirle para coanfitrión compartir la pantalla.
Listo.
Queríamos, bueno, también invitarlos, tenemos para la universidad, vamos a hacer un número especial sobre los 30 años de la Constitución del 91. So the next year will be the 30 years anniversary of the 1990 Constitution. So we are going to do a special issue related with that. And here is the call for papers. So if someone is want to present an article, si alguien quiere participar en esta convocatoria, es hasta el 31 de enero que tienen esa posibilidad. Va a estar pegado en las redes sociales de la revista Derecho al Estado. Y bueno, eso queríamos promocionar. ¿Ya permitieron a Richard compartir su pantalla?
Sí, señor.
Richard, you can do it now.
Oh, okay,
you can share your screen.
Great. Well, before I begin, I just want to say thank you to all of you for this invitation. I want to give a very special thank you to my friend Gonzalo, also to my friend Luisa. I have made so many good friends in Colombia, specifically in Bogota, at Externado, at Rosario, so many great friends, and I've learned so much from all of you. And this for me is just another opportunity to keep learning from you as we begin our discussion. So thank you for this invitation. And if I could, I'll begin to share my screen. Let's see if it's possible. I think I want to do a slideshow. I don't know if this will work, Gonzalo. Perhaps you can tell me if it works.
Yes,
It works, Richard. Yeah, it works.
Hey,
Perfect.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, once again, everyone, thank you so very, very much for this invitation to discuss one of my recent books called Constitutional Amendments, Making, Breaking, and Changing Constitutions, published just last year by Oxford University Press. And again, I've already thanked Gonzalo and Luisa and all of my friends. I want to just reiterate those thanks, because what's great about our field of comparative constitutional law is that we have such a small world, and we learn so much from each other now in ways that weren't possible before. With the digital age in which we find ourselves, we can circulate papers, we can do Zoom calls, and it's just really, really a gift to be a comparatist at this very time today in the world, where the flow and exchange of ideas is really unfettered, at least from my perspective, though perhaps not in all countries. So I want to thank you once again for this invitation. Really thrilled to be here. I want to thank Maria Camilla. I want to thank Manuela. I want to thank all of my friends at Externado for this wonderful invitation. And I encourage all of you to participate in the 30th anniversary issue that will be published in the Revista to mark the 30th anniversary of the Colombian Constitution. So my plan for today is to obviously accept Gonzalo's invitation to talk about my book, but I want to speak about one or two parts of the book in particular, not the whole book, just one or two parts. So I'd like to divide my discussion. Where is this button? Does that work? Does this work? I want to divide my discussion into maybe two or three parts. The first part is going to be about how we codify amendments in constitutions. Now, I'm speaking here only of codified constitutions. You know, there are many different kinds of constitutions. There are codified constitutions, like in the United States, for example, or in Colombia. There are uncodified constitutions in the world. Let's say, for example, the Constitution of the United Kingdom or the Constitution of New Zealand. And then there are constitutions that are self-consciously both codified and uncodified, partially codified and partially not, like the Constitution of Canada. But today I'm speaking only about the codified constitutions, but of course in our Q&A we can certainly discuss other kinds of constitutions. What I'll be discussing in this part of our talk is how we make official a memorialization of an amendment, how we put in the Constitution the amendment. Where do we put it? Do we put it at the end of the Constitution? Or do we put it somewhere in the middle? What do we do? And I'm going to give you the three major models of amendment codification that we find in the world. The second part of our discussion will focus on four problems that we encounter when we codify amendments. Four kinds of problems that we encounter when we codify amendments, either at the end, in the middle, or somewhere else. We'll talk about the problem of memorialization. We'll talk about the problem of obsolescence. We'll talk about the problem of harmonization. And finally, the problem of incorporation. And then if there's time, we'll talk about designing amendment rules from start to finish. What do you need to know if you're advising someone on how to create an amendment rule? What kinds of questions must you ask? Must you answer? I'll walk you through the questions and the answers if we have time. Gonzalo has asked me to speak for about 40 minutes or so. We'll see how we do. So let's talk about the first model of amendment codification, the invisible model. But first, before we start, let me just remind you of what we're talking about here when we talk about amendment codification. We're talking about where in a codified constitution it is indicated that the Constitution has been amended. How do we know when we pick up a constitution and we start reading it that it has been amended? I'm going to show you 3 different models of how we do that around the world with reference to constitutions all around the world. And the first of 3 models is what I want to call the invisible model. The invisible model of amendment codification. This is the Constitution of Norway's Article 2 from 1814. So think back to 206 years ago when the Constitution of Norway was written and came into force. This is what was written in the Constitution at the time. Jesuits and monastic orders shall not be tolerated. Jews are furthermore excluded from the kingdom. This is language from 1814. Hateful language, exclusionary language, language that we would not see in a modern constitution. But this appeared in the original Constitution of Norway. Now, if you look at the Constitution of Norway today, you will not find this language. What you'll see instead is this, Article 16, which has replaced Article 2. So if you look at the Constitution, the original language, hateful language, is now completely removed from the Constitution. It's as though it were never in the text at all. What you see instead of this very divisive, hateful language is this inclusionary language that celebrates difference and diversity. All inhabitants of the realm shall have the right to free exercise of their religion. All religious and belief communities should be supported on equal terms. So you see, this is the language that appears in the text of the Norwegian Constitution today. It's the result of an amendment to the Constitution. And when the Norwegian Constitution was amended to put this new text into it, the old exclusionary text was erased. And so this is one way that we codify amendments in a constitution. We simply erase what has been replaced, and we don't leave any evidence that it was ever there. That's why I call this first model the invisible model, because you don't see the old text that has been amended. It has just vanished. I mentioned there were 3 models. That's the first, the invisible model. Let's now turn to the second model. This is what I want to call the integrative model. So you've heard about the Norwegian Constitution, which just erases old text when it has been amended. It's as though it had never been there. Well, this is now the second model. What happens in the second model? Well, instead of Norway, let's go to India. This is the preamble in the Constitution of India. It says, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution." This is what appears in the text of the Indian Constitution today. But you see, the language that is bracketed, sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, that is the result of an amendment to the Constitution of India. That's not the original language. So what happens in India is that when you amend the Constitution, you put a footnote in the text of the Constitution that shows you the old language. So the original language of the text of the preamble didn't speak of a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. It spoke instead of a sovereign democratic republic. And so it was an amendment in 1977. That's what it stands for here, WEF 31, 1977. In 1977, the amendment, the 42nd Amendment, changed the preamble from sovereign democratic republic to sovereign, socialist, secular democratic republic. And so in contrast to the Norwegian constitution that just erases the text when it's been amended, the Indian constitution's model of integration leaves the old text there in the footnote and puts the new text in brackets in the text of the Constitution so that you know where the change has happened and also what has been changed. This is why I call it the integrative model, because it integrates right into the text of the Constitution, the text of the amendment itself. So far, so good. We have one model, the invisible model from Norway. We have a second model, the Indian model, which is the integrative model. Let me give you another example. You might benefit from just a second example from the Constitution of India. So this is the original Constitution of India. The state shall not discriminate against any citizen on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, or any of them. This appears in section 15(1) of the Constitution of India. But the Constitution of India was amended after this was originally put into the Constitution. There was an amendment, and the amendment did this. In fact, it was the very first amendment to the Constitution of India, which added this language. Nothing in this article or in clause 2 or article 29 shall prevent the state from making any special provision for the advancement of any socially or educationally backward classes of citizens or for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. So you see what's happened is that the First Amendment has added new language to the text of the Indian Constitution. And it shows you in the text today what is new and also when the amendment was made by using footnotes and brackets. So you see, this is a very stark contrast to what we see in the invisible model, which simply erases everything and puts in the new without any understanding, any marking of what has been changed, nor when. So the integrative model that we see in India actually tells you a lot when the Constitution is amended. Good, so we have two models so far. Let's go to the third and final model. You've heard about the invisible model in India. You've heard about the integrative model in, invisible in Norway, integrative in India, and now the appendative model. And here I want to go not too far from where I am. I'm in Texas right now. So we'll come to the United States. This is the original US Constitution from 1787. So as with all constitutions, there's a start and there's an end. Well, when the Constitution was written in 1787, began with a preamble, and then it ended with a number of signatures, okay? But then shortly thereafter, there was an amendment made in 1791, the First Amendment. And so what happened is that the Constitution indicated that it had been amended simply by putting the text of the amendment at the end of the Constitution in chronological order. So there was subsequent amendments, of course. In 1947, there was the 22nd Amendment that came in order at the end of the text of the Constitution, and it's placed right after the 21st Amendment and right before the 23rd Amendment in the text of the Constitution. And today, if you read the text of the Constitution, you'll see that the very last thing is the text of the 27th Amendment. Why? Because it's the most recent amendment to the US Constitution. So amendments in the United States are appended. They are appended to the end of the Constitution in chronological order. So what you see here is three different models of how we indicate in the text of the Constitution that the Constitution has been amended. You can do it the way that Norway does it, which is by erasing old text and putting in the new text, without telling anyone where in the old text the Constitution was amended. You can follow the Indian model of integration, where we go into the text of the Constitution and we use footnotes and brackets to indicate precisely what was changed and when. And then there's the third model, the model in the United States, the appendative model, where we append at the end of the Constitution the amendments without changing anything in the Constitution that comes before that amendment. So far, so good. We have three different models of amendment codification. What I want to do now is to discuss some of the implications for these three models of amendment codification. It's very interesting, yes, to know that Norway does this and India does that and the US does this. Very interesting. But we can actually learn a lot about the implications for choosing one model versus another. So let's begin with some of these implications. And I want to frame the implications in terms of problems that are confronted by constitutional designers, constitutional actors, when they set out to amend the Constitution using one of these three amendment codification models, okay? The first problem I tell you I'd look at is the problem of memorialization. The problem of memorialization. And now we want to go to Ireland, because Ireland uses the model of Norway. Ireland amends its constitution with the invisible model. So whenever the Constitution is amended, the old text is replaced and the new text is put into the Constitution, but we don't know where the change has happened in the Constitution because there's no marking of the change. There's no indication of which words have been changed, nor when they were changed. So this is a problem, I think, for some, because how do we know what has been changed? And how do we find out what in the Constitution has been changed by the amendment? There's no way to know unless you take the version of the Constitution immediately prior to the amendment coming into force, and then a second version of the Constitution immediately after it comes into force, the amendment. And you compare them very carefully to find what words have been changed and what's been moved around. But that's the only way to know what has been amended, because there is no marking. Unlike the United States Constitution, which uses the model of appending amendments to the end of the text, the Irish Constitution, the Norwegian Constitution, they both use the invisible model, and you can't know very easily what has been changed and when it's been changed. Same thing for the integrative model of amendment codification that we see in India. Remember the integrative model, where the constitutional actors go into the text, the existing text of the Constitution, and put in footnotes, put in brackets to indicate precisely what was changed and when it was changed as well. So it's very easy to tell what has been changed when we use the integrative model. So the problem of memorializing change is confronted very differently depending on which of these models you use. One could say, I think, with some confidence, that the Irish model of codifying amendments really is an erasure of the past. It erases old things, old words, old rules that after the amendment no longer appear. This might create problems for institutional memory, for tracking social progress, and for measuring how well the Constitution is living up to the promises that it makes to the people. So these are some of the problems that we confront when we use the invisible model. I want to now go to a second problem. I mentioned to you we'd have 4 problems that we're going to review. We've reviewed the problem of memorialization. Now we're going to review a problem of obsolescence. Obsolescence, and for that we want to go to the United States. The US Constitution, remember, uses the appendative model where the existing text of the Constitution remains untouched, unadulterated, no change. And then whenever there's an amendment, we just add to it. Add an amendment in chronological order. That's the American model of appending amendments. But with this model comes the problem of obsolescence, because old text remains in the Constitution, even though it may have been changed by a subsequent amendment. Because with the appendative model, nothing in the existing text ever changes. It remains unadulterated and untouched, which means that you may have old words, old rules, old principles that are now obsolete because they have been superseded by the text of the new amendment. Let me give you some examples. This is the language of Article 2, Sections 1 and 2 in the United States Constitution. As some of you, perhaps all of you know, the US Constitution is rooted in a framework of the separation of powers, where Article 1 discusses the powers of the legislature. Article 2 discusses the powers of the president. Article 3, the powers of the judiciary, and so on and so forth. There are 7 total articles. This second article now refers and deals with the powers of the president. And here what's interesting is that if you look at the language very carefully, you'll notice this. What do you see here? You see that the original Constitution speaks only of he, him, his, when we refer to the president. So if someone is reading the original text of the Constitution, they might think, oh, wait a second, only men can be president? Of course, once upon a time, women in the United States did not have the right to vote, did not have the right to be elected, did not have the right to do a lot of things. So there is a very jarring inconsistency between the original text of the Constitution and the present text and understanding of the Constitution. So how does this implicate the method of amendment codification in the United States? Well, as follows. This is the text, of course, of Article 2, Sections 1 and 2. And this is the text of the 14th Amendment and the 19th Amendment, because remember, the amendments go at the end of the Constitution in chronological order. The 14th Amendment guarantees everyone the equal protection of the laws. The 19th Amendment guarantees women the right to vote, something that they did not have free of infringement prior to the 19th Amendment. And so what you see is that the 14th and the 19th Amendments together combined create an obsolescence in the language of the original Constitution, which speaks only of he, his, him in reference to the president. But today, because of the 14th Amendment, because of the 19th Amendment, because of constitutional case law, we know that that he must be read to include her as well, must be read as non-exhaustive. But you see, we don't have that reflected in the text of the US Constitution because it does not use the invisible model of amendment codification, in which case you would read this in modern times saying he or she shall hold office. He or she shall have power. But instead, what remains is the vestiges of the exclusionary past in the United States. Let me give you one more example. before the other example, let me show you this. This is quite interesting. This is the US Constitution had it used the integrative model to codify amendments. So remember the Indian Constitution with its bracketed text and its footnotes? Well, this is what it would look like in the US if it used that same model of integration for amendments. You would have this bracketed text. He or she may hold office. He or she shall have power. And you would have footnotes referencing the amendment that caused the change to happen. But that is not the case in the United States. Let me give you another example, and then we'll turn to some other problems, okay? One of the most problematic, and that's putting it lightly, problems in American history is its original sin, slavery. The US Constitution, of course, is anchored in slavery. Virtually every part of the Constitution is a result of slavery and the effort either to protect slavery or to leave it in place until a future day when a battle would happen, a debate or a real life battle about what to do with America's original sin. This is language that appears in the original US Constitution, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 2, and Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. The first clause is what we call the Fugitive Slave Clause. And it says that if an enslaved person escapes, then there is a lawful obligation to return that enslaved person to the master, to the owner of that enslaved person. That is the Fugitive Slave Clause in the US Constitution. The second clause that you see here, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, is known as the 3/5 Clause, which treats enslaved persons as 3/5 of a person, not a full person, 3/5 of a person. So if you look at the Constitution today, in the year 2020, this language is still there. But of course, the Fugitive Slave Clause is no longer valid. And of course, there are no lawfully bound enslaved persons in the United States outside of the prison industrial complex. But yet this language still applies because it still exists in the US Constitution. It's invalid without force and effect, but it still has an effect on us when we read it. The reason why these two clauses are no longer in force is because of these two amendments. The 13th Amendment that abolishes slavery, and the 14th Amendment that guarantees the equal protection of the law, that guarantees due process. These two amendments have obviated, have eviscerated, have nullified the lawful effect of the first two clauses, the Fugitive Slave Clause and the 3/5 Clause. And yet, because the United States uses the appended model, all of the old text is still there for everyone to see. Still there for everyone to see. And so there are these obsolete texts in the US Constitution that speak of the president as though only men can be elected, that still refer to enslaved persons. This is one of the consequences of the appendative model. This is one of the problems. It yields obsolescence. So imagine you are a young person reading the Constitution for the first time. Let's say you're in elementary school, let's say you're in high school, and you're really reading the Constitution of the United States for the first time, and you see that, oh my gosh, only men can be president. What kind of a country am I living in? Or you see reference to people counting as 3/5 of a person. This would shake you. This would trouble you. But that's the consequence of the appendative model of amendment codification. The old text, divisive, hateful, exclusionary, remains for all to see. I mentioned to you there were 4 problems that we're going to discuss. The first was the problem of memorialization. How do we remember? The second was the problem of obsolescence. There's old text still in the Constitution. The third now, the problem of incorporation. And now we turn to Mexico. Mexico's constitution was written in 1917. It's still in force today. Mexico's constitution memorializes its amendments, not using the appendative model, not using the invisible model, but using the integrative model. So political actors go into the constitution that exists at the time and change things, add things, remove things, but they make a marking of what has been changed and when. One of the problems with the integrative model is really quite evident when you look at the Mexican Constitution. And it's a problem that is virtually unique to the integrative model that we see in Mexico and also in India. You should know that the 1917 Constitution of Mexico had about 22,000 words in its text. So if you were to count all the words, 22,000. By the time the Mexican Constitution turned 100 years old in 2017, the number of words in the Constitution had grown to about 67,000. So the Constitution went from 22,000 words to about 67,000 words in 100 years as a result of amendments to the Constitution. Why? Because the integrative model allowed political actors just to put things in the Constitution, add things in the Constitution. And over the years, there have been hundreds of amendments to the Constitution of Mexico. By one count, in 2018, there had been over 700 amendments to the text of the Mexican Constitution. And the reason why the text has ballooned from 22,000 words to 67,000 words in 2017 is because of the integrative model. Political actors have just added here and there whenever they wanted texts to the original text of the Mexican Constitution without much regard to where the text should go in order to keep the Constitution coherent. So one of the problems is precisely this problem of incorporation. When the time comes to integrate the amendment into the text of the existing Constitution, do you do it carefully or do you do it carelessly? And what's happened in Mexico is that the Constitution has been amended in a way that people describe as careless. That's not coming from me alone. Great Mexican scholars of constitutional law have made this point, and they are now fighting to try to consolidate the Mexican Constitution to clean up the mess caused by the misuse, the careless use of the integrative model of constitutional codification over the years. So that's the problem of incorporation that we see in the Constitution of Mexico. I mentioned to you there were 4 problems that we discuss. We've talked about the problem of, memorialization. We've talked about the problem of obsolescence. We just spoke about the problem of incorporation. And now finally, let us talk about the problem of harmonization. And for that, we go from North America to Europe to Switzerland. The problem of harmonization is a very interesting one because it is unique to none of the three models. Each of the three models has to confront this problem of harmonization, whether you're using the invisible model, the integrative model, or the appended model. Every single model of amendment codification has to confront this problem of harmonization. The difference is who does the harmonizing and when the harmonizing happens. What do I mean by harmonization? I mean interpreting how an amendment affects the rest of the Constitution. How to harmonize an amendment with everything in the Constitution that has come before it. That is the problem of harmonization. In the invisible model, in Norway, in Ireland, the problem of harmonization happens and is confronted at the time of amendment. Why? Because it is at the time of amendment that political actors have to decide what to erase in the Constitution and what to put in its place. So the task of figuring out how an amendment impacts the Constitution, that is done at the point of amendment itself. You might think that's a good idea because it allows the intent of the amending generation to govern, right? They are there, they know what they mean when they amend the Constitution in this particular way. They know what they want removed from the original text as a result. So it happens at the time of amendment, and it is done by the designers of the Constitution, okay? Now, the integrative model also confronts this problem of harmonization. This is the Indian case, and it's also the Swiss case because Switzerland uses the integrative model to codify amendments. Now, who does the harmonization and how is it reflected? Well, this is very similar to what we see in Norway and Ireland because the harmonization between the amendment and the existing Constitution happens at the time of the amendment. Why? Because the designers have to decide what to put into brackets and what to put into footnotes, what to indicate has been changed and when. And so just like the invisible model, the integrative model confronts the problem of harmonization at the time of codification. But the problem of harmonization also rears its head after codification when we're dealing with the integrative model. Because even if a constitution indicates in its text that this has changed that with a footnote and bracketed text, it may be that in the future, courts must interpret that amendment in light of its effect on other provisions in the Constitution. Take one amendment, for example, an amendment that changes the language to the preamble. You saw this in the Indian case. We changed the language of the preamble and we put in a footnote and bracketed text in the Constitution. But in the future, let's say 20 years after the preamble has been amended, someone might say that the effect of this amendment to the preamble actually has an impact on a different part of the Constitution that was not foreseen at the time of the amendment. And so someone must then interpret whether the amendment does in fact have this effect on other parts of the Constitution. And who does that work? Who harmonizes the amendment with the old Constitution's text? It's not the designers, it's the courts, it's the interpreters of the Constitution. So this is a different way that the problem of harmonization appears. Third, the problem of harmonization appears differently, manifests itself differently when we're talking about the appendative model of codification. Gonzalo, I think I have about 4 or 5 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, it's right.
Thank you very much. The appendative model confronts the problem of harmonization differently. So on the first point about what happens when the amendment is codified, nothing. We just codify it. There is no need to try to harmonize the new text with the old, because the appendative model just puts amendments at the end of the text. We don't have to think about anything. We don't have to think about what it changes and where the changes are made. We just put it at the end of the text. But the problem of harmonization in terms of interpreting how the amendment impacts the rest of the Constitution, that happens after the amendment has been codified, and that is done by courts, because they have to interpret whether the 14th Amendment has any effect on any other parts of the Constitution that came before it, whether the 26th Amendment has any effect on any parts of the Constitution that came before. So the task of harmonizing the new with the old belongs to the courts under the appendative model. So Gonzalo, Luisa, Maria Camila, Manuela, this has been just a discussion of something that I think, quite frankly, Gonzalo, no one talks about. No one talks about the different ways that we can codify amendments. This is not something that constitutional designers actually think about. And if they do think about it, they think about it at the very end of the process. More likely than not, the very first time that any country thinks about where and how they will indicate in their constitution that the Constitution has been amended, the only time, the first time they'll do that is when the First Amendment is made to their Constitution. They don't think about it before. What I've tried to do in my brief remarks with you today is to explain to you why it's very important that they think about it. Because where one places amendments in the text of the Constitution, whether it's invisible, whether it's integrative, whether it's appendative, has really important implications for constitutional law, well beyond the aesthetic dimension of the Constitution, right? Much further than just, oh, well, we prefer to have amendments appended, or we prefer to have it footnoted, or we prefer to have it invisible. These are aesthetic features of a constitution. What I've tried to show you is that this goes much further than simple aesthetics. It has real, deep, profound, meaningful implications for constitutional law, for constitutional design, for who gets to interpret the Constitution as a final matter. And so Gonzalo, Luisa, Maria Camila, Manuela, thank you so very much. I'm going to just stop now. This would be other things I would have discussed, but we had such a vast number of details to cover in our discussion of the different ways that constitutions codify their amendments that I didn't get to the other part, but we can certainly talk about it in the Q&A, and it's discussed in great detail in the book. So I'll stop now and I will say thank you, and I look forward to hearing from Luisa. Should I stop my screen now or leave it on? What do you think, Gonzalo? Stop it, yes?
Luisa, what do you think?
No, you can leave it.
You want me to leave it?
Yes.
Okay, I will put it back.
You can leave it. Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for that didactic teaching on constitutional amendment models. I think we have all learned about the models of amendment, the problems in amendment, and many details, as you said, are, well, very fascinating for yes, to learn. And I would like just to say that, well, the presentation you did today and the book, when you read the book about constitutional amendment, making, breaking, and changing constitution, I just want to outline that through your book, you make us travel. Today, you made us travel. You showed us how the models of amendment codification are in many countries. So you showed us different models in Norway, then we went to India, then we went to the States. And when you talk about the problems in amendment codification, you just made us travel again, talking about Ireland, like a memorialization change, like an Irish model that it's an example of memorialization change. Then you talk about the problem of obsolescence in the United States and all that vestiges of the past. And then you talked about Mexico, like a model of incorporation.
Mhm.
And well, then we went to Switzerland. And it is the same model we can find in the book when we read every chapter in your book. You outline different examples in different countries. So I want just to outline and just to introduce your book is like, I want to say that your book and your presentation shows the globetrotter you are. And and I am sure you have been in all that countries and you have studied the constitutional system in that place. So congratulations for that fascinating book, because you have contributed to comparative constitutional law. I think it's a fascinating book, and I can just congratulate you for that amazing work you did through almost 5 years of constant work. Well, I just would like to talk about the main chapters of your book and ask you some questions or some yes, some reflections I had while I was reading your book. And the main questions you present is how an amendment is constitutional. This, the one of the first questions you present in your introduction, how lawmakers can pervert the formal rules to undermine the norms and practice of democracy. How amendment has generated long discussions about the functions or limits of amendment rules. These are the many questions that have not been answered, but you can give an answer, or you can give an idea in each chapter of this book, an answer about a particular situation or constitutional changes that have raised lessons around the world. So, Richard, you offer us a wide, a broad, a very rich study about amendment procedures in comparative law and how to get valid constitutional amendment. We can find many subjects in that book, like you focus in amendment rules. What is the purpose of amendment rules? This is one of the main questions. And through very easy definitions, you show us how constitutional amendment rules unfold constitutional values. No? For example, you say that China deserves to be exalted as the country that make constitutional reforms to abolish the end of the presidential term, for example. Then you give us definitions about amendment, what is amendment, what is dismemberment, like an amendment that contradicts or transforms the original framework of the Constitution. You give us also a deep study about difficulties faced by constitutions. Especially you point out Polish constitutions that requires unanimity to be reformed. Mention as well the culture of the amendment in the different constitutions, like as an accelerator of change or as a limiter of change. This topic extends also with unamendable clauses, where the only modification, say, is to rewrite the Constitution, because you can't do another, you don't have other ways. And one of those forms respond to constitutional interpretation that is not codified, but that makes clause unamendable. And I would like to stress on the architecture of constitutional amendment. I found that chapter exciting, interesting, because you tell us that codifying, well, you talk us about codifying procedures for both for amendment, but also for dismemberment, as to unmake constitution. You give us the example of Georgian constitution that was transformed through a procedure of amendment imposing restrictions to political opposition and other reforms, like abolishing the semi-presidential system into a parliamentary system, and changes also the stack of the judiciary in its favor. So you talk us about like dismemberment, like a major reform that changes and rewrites the former constitution without the popular consent, or that doesn't give legitimacy. So I found also very interesting the matter of time. And I would like to ask you, well, something about that. Like, time is determinant to legitimate the amendment. It is like another rule to validate and legitimate amendments. You showed us like an example of Canada, like a good example of deliberation requirement, because as you said, Canada is one. There is 1 year from the date of proposal of amendment to consider, and from that time to amendment, it may pass 3 years after ratification deadline, and it becomes official. And on the other side, you showed us a long interval amendment in the USA, like 200 years, maybe 200 years, like for the 27th amendment you mentioned before, and it took almost 200 years to ratify, to take the ratification, because in the United States Constitution there is no deadline. So we have, Gonzalo has been doing this kind of seminars from a month or maybe more a month ago, and we have been talking about Chilean example, because Chile is now preparing for an amendment, and one of the main questions in all that seminars we have been doing about Chile is the time, because they are preparing a referendum maybe at the beginning of October, and then they have to convoke the National Assembly or the Constituent Assembly, and then they have to write the Constitution. And one of the main questions was, well, there is a moment that they can't go out this moment. They have to take advantage of that moment and write the Constitution, because it was a Constitution that was written during the dictator. So they don't want anymore that dictator, that Constitution. So I would like to ask you, what was a prudent or a just what length it may last a constitutional amendment to be legitimate and to have just like a kind of agreement of the people, and that the people may have the impression to participate and to be in. So is there a special length? Is there like a prudential length to write a constitutional amendment? So this is my first question. And well, I don't want to talk longer. I just take one of your reflections you were talking about in the United States, when you were talking about the problem of obsolescence in the United States. I would like to ask you if, according to that problem, according to the obsolescence of the United Constitution problem, do you think the vestige of exclusionary that you were reminding us, the vestige of an exclusionary past, must be abolished? Do you think what we are living today, with all that Black Lives Matter and all that movements that are around the United States, needs a constitutional amendment? It may be solved by a constitutional or an amendment process? So, well, I have many other questions, Richard, but maybe we have another opportunity to talk about that. And I would like to give the chance to the person or people who are listening to us, and just give them the word and the occasion to make the questions. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for that amazing discussion.
Thank you, Luisa. Could you please translate a little bit what you say in English? Just
Okay.
a brief.
Ok, sí. Bueno, no, digamos, para resumir, bueno, yo hice como un recuento de lo que Richard nos presentó, que fue más o menos como lo que él nos mostró en sus diapositivas, que nos hablaba de cuáles eran como los modelos de enmiendas constitucionales. Entonces, pues yo hice como un recuento de cuando nos habla de los modelos de enmiendas constitucionales, habla del modelo invisible cuando se refiere a Noruega, habla del modelo integrativo o integracionista cuando se refiere a India, habla del modelo apendativo, que se refiere a Estados Unidos, y son diferentes modelos que él dice que tienen, digamos, un lenguaje, digamos, conforme a la época en la que fue redactado. Entonces pueden ser lenguajes un poco excluyentes, otros lenguajes pueden ser un poco incluyentes. Y el lenguaje, digamos, el modelo de Estados Unidos es un lenguaje que tiene las dos cosas, porque, bueno, no sé cómo se traduciría eso en español, como apéndice, que quisiera decir que se deja el texto viejo y si se quieren incluir nuevas cosas, se hace como en apéndices. Entonces, es como un modelo que deja lo antiguo y digamos, incorpora lo nuevo. Bueno, entonces yo hice un recuento de eso y luego él nos habla de cuáles son los problemas de digamos, de las enmiendas, cuáles son los problemas que pueden encontrar las constituciones escritas para enmendarlas, cuáles son los problemas. Entonces nos habla, digamos, de varios ejemplos. Él nos dice que pues está el modelo inglés, el modelo irlandés, que es un modelo que borra todas las reglas. O sea, ellos no tienen en cuenta lo que ya existió, sino tratan de incorporar las nuevas enmiendas, haciendo como tabla rasa de todo lo que existió, y entonces lo hace desaparecer. Ese es el modelo, ¿cómo se llama ese? Sí, el modelo de memorialización. Luego habla del problema de obsolescencia, que es el típico modelo norteamericano, que ellos no hacen lo que hacen los irlandeses, sino que simplemente mantienen lo antiguo y incorporan nuevos textos. Entonces las enmiendas son textos que son incorporados a lo viejo. Entonces quedan como vestigios de lo que fue el pasado, de un pasado excluyente, de un pasado que pues, realmente ya no tiene, digamos, razón de ser. Nos habla también del modelo mexicano, que es un modelo, digamos, de incorporación, digamos, de varias enmiendas, o sea, se van incorporando las enmiendas poco a poco, y un modelo de armonización que es el suizo, que es, digamos, el típico modelo donde se trata de ajustar la constitución antigua con los modelos contemporáneos. Entonces, con base en eso, pues yo le hago, digamos, una referencia a lo que dice su libro, pues digamos que su libro es como un viaje también por el mundo entero, como nos hizo la presentación de hoy. Es un viaje, digamos, donde nos muestra las diferentes, digamos, problemas que puede encontrar una constitución para ser enmendada. Entonces, él nos habla del capítulo 1, donde nos dice para qué son las reglas de enmiendas, o sea, para qué tendríamos que pensar de reformas de constitución, o sea, para qué tendríamos que hablar de reglas para reformar una constitución. Entonces, pues, dice que sí, obviamente las reglas para reformar la constitución son necesarias porque ahí están exaltados los valores. Es decir, ahí está realmente consagrados los valores democráticos, los valores de, digamos, de participación, sí, o sea, de lo que puede ser la democracia. También, digamos, en su libro, él hace mucha referencia a lo que puede ser las enmiendas y yo no sé cómo se podría traducir eso, los dismemberment, que no son enmiendas propiamente dichas, sino son transformaciones de la Constitución. Entonces, como que son transformaciones un poco maquilladas de la Constitución y que pues realmente se hacen sin seguir los modelos tradicionales, por ejemplo, de referéndum, sino que más o menos como que el constituyente derivado se apropia, digamos, de unas funciones en cierta medida y transforma la Constitución, ¿sí? Y ese es el modelo típico que él nos habla del modelo de Georgia, de la República de Georgia, que dice que pues recientemente se hizo una reforma constitucional donde el partido de gobierno hizo una transformación de la Constitución, hablando de, bueno, cambió el sistema presidencial al sistema parlamentario, cambió, digamos, el sistema judicial, creo que limitó los partidos políticos, entonces ese es el típico caso de dismemberment, o sea, como que es una, una enmienda maquillada de reforma total de la Constitución. Y entonces, pues digamos que yo le hablo digamos, digamos, de esas modalidades de reforma. Y entonces cuando él habla de eso, pues yo le digo, y bueno, y adicionalmente hay un elemento que él dice que es muy importante el tiempo, que el tiempo es determinante en las reformas constitucionales. Y nos da el caso, por ejemplo, de Canadá, donde dice que pues más o menos entre el tiempo de la presentación de la enmienda y la validación de la enmienda pueden haber transcurrido 3 años, perdón. Y nos habla también del ejemplo de Estados Unidos, donde dice, ah, no, en Estados Unidos hubo, mientras se presentó una enmienda y se validó por todos los estados, transcurrieron 200 años, que fue la enmienda 27 a la cual él hizo, digamos, referencia anteriormente. Entonces yo le preguntaba que digamos, en las diferentes conversaciones que hemos tenido anteriormente y sobre todo en el caso de Chile, pues salía a relucir ese tema, que cuál era el tiempo prudencial para que pues se dé una reforma constitucional. Nosotros en América Latina tenemos, digamos, una tendencia que se haga en 6 meses, 8 meses, un año, máximo, digamos, tal vez año y medio, pero realmente no, digamos, un transcurrir tan largo tal vez, pues no es tan usual en América Latina. Entonces, yo le pregunto que cuál sería como la recomendación que daría al caso chileno para que haya, digamos, un tiempo prudencial entre la presentación, entre el plebiscito que se va a votar en octubre y pues la votación la conformación de la Asamblea Constituyente y pues todo lo que es la redacción de la Constitución. Entonces, ¿cuál sería como ese tiempo prudencial? Y le hice una última pregunta y fue haciendo referencia precisamente a ese modelo obsoleto o bueno, sí, no sé cómo se traduciría, sí, obsoleto, o sea, ese problema de obsolescencia que tiene la Constitución de Estados Unidos y es relacionada con pues todo ese movimiento de Black Matters Life, que le pregunto si realmente pues ese carácter obsoleto que tienen algunas cláusulas en Estados Unidos y ese movimiento, digamos, de Black Matter Lives y pues todas las marchas que hemos visto últimamente, si eso no es, digamos, como un llamado para que se saquen de la Constitución todo ese pasado, eh, digamos, excluyente, racista, bueno, todos esos aspectos, si él no cree que eso se debería ser abolido y se debería abolir a través de una reforma constitucional. Esas son como las preguntas que le hice. No sé si de pronto le daríamos paso a que él responda y después hacemos otras preguntas o no sé cómo lo
Sí, yo
quieres
creo.
manejar.
Sí, I think that it's better that you answer first all the remarks that Luisa made, and then we come to the other persons who are going to also to ask something about your talk. Thank you a lot.
Beautiful. Well, thank you again, Louisa, for your comments on the book, for having read it so carefully. I should say my very first trip to Colombia was hosted by Louisa. So my introduction to Colombia and the beautiful city of Bogota and all the rich learning that I've done in Colombia, that was a world that was opened to me for the first time by Louisa. So I'm very grateful to Louisa for that invitation many years ago and for remaining my friend since then. So it's a great honor for me to have the benefit of your comments. The fact that you read the book and you read it so carefully and you have given me these very helpful questions because they make me think about the problems that I discuss in the book. So thank you so very much. The first question you asked, I think, was about time with regard to the constituent process currently underway in Chile. And your question was, is there an optimal time for constitution making, constitution changing? And I think the answer has to be no. The answer has to be no, because time alone will not get us the outcome that we want. I think time can serve many good functions. Time can serve the function of making sure that we create a process that is inclusionary, that is participatory, and that is deliberative. And so the more time we devote to the process of constitution making in a way that makes sure that there's meaningful opportunities for participation and input from the people, I think the better. That is when a lengthy process is good. So when a lengthy process of constitution making or constitution changing is long because we're trying to find ways to give meaningful opportunities to the people to say what they would like to see in their constitution, that is a good use of a long time to create or to change a constitution. But if we're just taking time to take time, and we're not taking advantage of that to find ways to give people a voice in the process, then that's a problem. Because time is always of the essence when we're speaking about constitutional change, whether making or changing constitutions, always of the essence. Why? Because the average lifespan of a constitution is very short. The US Constitution has lasted for a long time, but that's not normal. It's not normal for a constitution to last for 240 years. It's just not. It's not normal for a constitution to last as long as the Norwegian constitution of 206 years. It's just not normal. The average lifespan of a constitution is 19 years, 19 years. And so the longer we take to make a constitution or to change it, that causes a problem for the possible endurance of a constitution, because it's going to perhaps impact how long the constitution remains in force afterward. Now, scholars have shown that the more inclusive a constitution making or changing process is, the better it will be for the endurance of the Constitution. So I think using time to involve more people into the process to get their input, that's actually good because it will serve the interests of constitutional endurance. And I believe that constitutional endurance is a good thing. It's a good thing because it serves the purpose of stability. Constitution making procedures are interesting for us lawyers who like to watch those processes unfold, but there are moments of high instability and high risk. And we don't want to have many of those in the life of a country. And so the fewer of these transitions there can be, I think, the better, if we're concerned about ensuring human, civil, political rights, if we're concerned about giving people a voice in the writing of their own constitution, if we're concerned with stability, we don't want to take a long time to write a constitution. However, if we're taking a long time in order to bring people into the process, to make it more deliberative, to give them a voice, to listen to them, that's good. That's good. So you see, it's a balance, not only between, it's not just a time question, it's time and the values and the objectives that we have in making things take longer to do. And then the second question you asked, which I thought was really interesting, it's a challenging question for me, is whether the US Constitution should be rewritten in order to erase all of the old vestiges of hate and exclusion in the original text. Vestiges that are there precisely because the US Constitution follows the Integrative Model, where the original text stays the same and all the amendments are added in the end. So all of the old stuff is there, good and bad, it's still there. Whether or not it's still in force, it is all still there for everyone to see. So your question, should the US Constitution be rewritten to get rid of those things? That's a tough question, because on the one hand, the answer might be yes, of course. We should rewrite the US Constitution to make it gender neutral, to say that both men and women can be president. Although today, gender neutral language would include he, she, and they. Yes, we want to get rid of the hateful language of slavery, counting persons, enslaved persons as 3/5 of a person. Of course, we want to get rid of that because we want the Constitution to be seen by everyone and read by everyone as their Constitution. This is what Americans would say about their own Constitution. I think some Americans. On the other hand, others would say, no, it's not a good idea to get rid of these vestiges of the hateful past of America. Why? Because if you read the Constitution from start to the middle to the finish, what you see, precisely because of the Integrative Model that leaves nothing changed, leaves everything untouched. What you see from start to middle to finish is the progress that the United States has made over time. The increasing measure of rights and liberties, the increasing intensity and degree of democratic freedoms given to the people over time. When you start from the beginning, which has slavery and very gendered language, to the Bill of Rights, which grants fundamental rights, to the 14th Amendment, which protects equality, the 15th that says you cannot be denied your right to vote by reason of race, the 19th that says you cannot be denied the right to vote by reason of your sex, and so on and so on and so on. What you have is a history of the increasing level of freedom in the US Constitution. So you see, I think there are two possible answers, obviously. And it's very difficult for me to choose one or the other because I am not American. Of course, I study the text very closely and I live in the United States, but it affects me differently from the way it affects an ordinary American reading the text. So it's a difficult question, Louisa. I think there are pros and there are cons. Good reasons to start from scratch, to rewrite the Constitution. Good reasons just to keep the appendative model as is, because Americans then get to see all of the progress they have made in all of these years and the progress that they still have left to make in the years ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a huge question that I understand that there is no answer. There is not one answer. So let me give place to other questions that I see in the chat. There are many. So maybe Maria Camila, can you read them because they are in Spanish?
Yeah, if you prefer, we can translate the first answers that Professor Albert has answered during this first part, and then we can give place to other questions. You agree?
Yes, yes, yes.
Of course. Well, thank you, Professor. Of course, this is a very, very interesting topic. And bueno, vamos a tratar de ser un poco breves con la traducción, ¿no? Como rescatando los puntos neurálgicos de la intervención del profesor Albert. Bueno, la primera pregunta tiene que ver con los tiempos que se están manejando con el proceso constituyente en Chile, ¿no? Frente a esto, el profesor Albert nos invita a ver el tema del tiempo en balance, ¿no? Entre el tiempo con unos valores democráticos y de participación ciudadana, particularmente la inclusión, la participación y la deliberación. Entonces, digamos que no existe una fórmula perfecta, según lo que él dice, ¿no? Para planear un tiempo en el cual se debe hacer una enmienda constitucional o un proceso constituyente como tal, pero sí podemos poner en la balanza estos valores y pues también nos invita a revisar el tiempo de duración que tienen las constituciones, la vigencia que tienen las constituciones y nos muestra como datos empíricos, por ejemplo, sobre la duración en promedio que tienen las constituciones en el mundo, según los estudios que él ha hecho, y destaca que hay un promedio de duración o de enforcement de estas constituciones de 19 años. Digamos que lo ideal sería, según la respuesta que el profesor Albert da a las preguntas de la profesora Luisa, no extendernos en el tiempo pues, de una manera excesiva, pero igual esto es una decisión que compete a cada proceso y a cada sociedad de acuerdo a la balanza o cómo compensa estos valores de participación democrática. Pasando a la segunda respuesta, que tiene que ver con volver a escribir una constitución de Estados Unidos, pues acá hay dos caras de la moneda, los pros y los contras. En los pros o en las ventajas que el profesor Albert explica o nos pone presente, es que, claro, sería conveniente volver a escribir una constitución de los Estados Unidos en la medida en que esto permitiría remover este lenguaje excluyente, por ejemplo, en lo relativo al género o lo relativo a la esclavitud, ¿no? Que fueron los dos ejemplos que se pudieron ver durante su exposición. Pero por otra parte, nos dice, claro, no sería conveniente modificar o volver a hacer una nueva constitución en la medida en que ver este lenguaje que es excluyente, que nos recuerda cierta restricción de las libertades, nos permite ver asimismo un progreso en la medida en que las enmiendas van manifestando un proceso de progreso, de reconocimiento de las libertades básicas de las personas, y pone como ejemplo, y pues nos dice, claro, esto nos muestra un avance en cuestión de grado, de intensidad, de protección de las libertades democráticas y particularmente nos permite reconocer los derechos fundamentales y pone ejemplos como la enmienda 14 o la enmienda 15, en la enmienda 14 donde se reconoce la igualdad de las personas. Entonces, esto es un resumen de las respuestas que generosamente nos ha compartido el profesor Albert. Entonces, profesora Luisa, profesor Gonzalo, si quieren seguimos leyendo algunas preguntas.
Y hay unas
Gracias,
preguntas
María
muy
Camila.
largas, otras muy cortas, no sé
Pero
si...
las podemos resumir, ¿no?
Y pues
Sí.
tengo acá como un mapa de 4 o 5 temas que he logrado identificar en las preguntas que han hecho nuestros participantes y podemos hablar como en principio, 1, del rol de las Cortes Constitucionales, ¿no? 2, de la arquitectura constitucional o del diseño institucional de las constituciones respecto de las enmiendas. Otra que tiene que ver con el diseño del territorio y las enmiendas constitucionales, teniendo en cuenta los cambios, por ejemplo, de el área metropolitana de Bogotá y sus alrededores y el cambio de nombre de la Ciudad de México. 4, digamos, una pregunta recurrente que ha sido ¿cuál es el mejor modelo para codificar estas enmiendas o estos mecanismos de enmienda constitucional? Y el 5 sería como cómo analizar estas enmiendas constitucionales a la luz de una lectura sistemática de la Constitución, es decir, si estas enmiendas a su vez modifican otras disposiciones constitucionales. No sé si...
Sí, yo creo que eso podría ser. Pensemos por alguna de ellas, yo creo. La que...
De las Cortes. Preguntémosle las Cortes.
Well, Professor.
Yeah, Gonzalo, I can begin, I think, with the first set of questions, if you like.
Yeah, we have like 5 topics.
Yeah, no problem. I can begin with the role of the court. That's no
The
problem.
role, of course, yeah, related with the constitutional amendments.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is one of the most interesting questions in the study of public law today. What should be the role of courts in the changing of a constitution? One of the most interesting trends that we see around the world is courts either arrogating to themselves the power to review the constitutionality of amendments, or courts being given the power to do that by the text of the Constitution, as is the case in the ordinary judicial review of laws, where we see what is called a counter-majoritarian problem. The very same problem is exacerbated when it comes to a constitutional amendment, because we're dealing with a higher law, the very highest law. Often, laws passed by the people in the exercise of their constituent authority to rewrite the Constitution as they wish, perhaps through a referendum, for example. So where the court is invalidating an amendment to the Constitution that has been legitimated by the informed popular will of the people, that raises a real challenge for the role of the court in a constitutional democracy. So what do we do? What do we do? My own view has been, is now, will be tomorrow, that it's a problem when courts invalidate amendments, but not always. So in some circumstances, it's a bigger problem than in other circumstances. It's not ever a good idea in constitutional argumentation to give one answer to one problem, because the problems in comparative public law manifest themselves differently. So if I were to say to you that jurisdiction A has an amendment rule that requires the agreement of the national legislature by a 2/3 supermajority and the agreement of the states by 3/4 supermajority, that's a very high threshold to amend the Constitution, versus Constitution B, which requires to amend the Constitution just a simple majority of Parliament. That's it. These are two very different amendment rules. Yes, the first is hard, the second is easy. It's not right to say that courts should or should not have the power to invalidate an amendment as applies to both. We have to think differently as to both of these examples, because it may be that precisely because it's so hard to amend the Constitution in the first case, that we don't need to have the additional check of a court in that case. But precisely because it is so easy to amend the Constitution in the second case, where all you need is a parliamentary majority to make an amendment to the higher law. If there's anywhere where we need a check from the courts or elsewhere, it's in that case. So I don't like easy answers that give a blanket rule for all constitutions. We need to know more about the Constitution that we're talking about to answer the question, what should be the role of the court in this jurisdiction? I need to know, is it hard to amend the Constitution? Is it easy? Is it a multi-party parliament? Does it have a dominant parliament? I need to know, how do the states or the provinces or the lender interrelate with the federal national government? I need to know if it's a federation or is it a unitary state? Generally, my answer to the question whether courts should invalidate amendments, generally my answer is no. But it's always no with an asterisk, because I need to know more about the country we're dealing with. And even still, even if the amendment rule is easy in a country where the court is thinking about exercising this power, on the one hand, you might say, well, yes, it's good, exercise the power to review this amendment because it's so easy to amend the Constitution. We don't want the Constitution to be treated like a statute. On the other hand, you might think, well, maybe there are alternatives. Maybe there are other things a court can do instead of invalidating the amendment. And we can talk about these alternatives as I discuss in the book as well. So my answer to the role of courts is, it depends. There cannot be one answer to this question for all jurisdictions. We have to think about it and discuss it specifically as relates to a particular jurisdiction, because jurisdictions are different. In some countries, the referendum is the highest power of change, like in France. In other countries, the referendum has no role in a national amendment, like in the United States or in India. So we need to really speak specifically about specific constitutions to discuss whether the role of a court should be this or that. But generally, my answer is that courts should not invalidate amendments.
Bueno, si se puede ver una traducción.
Well, thank you again, Professor. Bueno, en conclusión, la respuesta a esta primera pregunta del papel de las Cortes es que no hay una receta o una carta blanca para poder dar una solución a todos los casos, ¿no? Depende como del caso individualmente considerado, y eso nos lleva a ver los modelos constitucionales que cada constitución plantea para el Estado en concreto, desde su ordenamiento entre Estados federados o Estados unitarios, y asimismo, digamos, las posibilidades de enmiendas o cambios constitucionales que las mismas constituciones proveen. Entonces, el profesor Albert nos presenta dos escenarios, uno fácil, donde modificar la Constitución requiere, por ejemplo, mayorías simples, y en ese caso, digamos, el papel de la Corte Constitucional, claro que empieza a ser más relevante debido a que este cambio constitucional es fácil. Y por otra parte tenemos un escenario difícil, ¿no? Donde nos pone las mayorías cualificadas como ejemplo de una posibilidad de cambio de la Constitución rígida o más difícil, donde probablemente las Cortes Constitucionales, claro, tengan un papel más cuestionado en la medida en que estas mayorías cualificadas pues ya tienen un alto grado de legitimidad. Entonces, acá hay algunos ejemplos con los que podemos como aterrizar este análisis que nos pone presente el profesor Albert, como Francia y el papel que tienen para ellos el referendo como posibilidad de cambio constitucional, donde pues tiene un un rol significativo, y por otra parte, constituciones como la de Estados Unidos o la de India, donde el referendo pues claramente no tiene este rol preponderante. Entonces no hay una receta particular para responder esta pregunta, depende del caso concreto.
That's right. I need a concrete case. I need to know specifically which country we're talking about, and then we can discuss more specifically whether a court should have that power. Gonzalo,
Okay.
I know there was another set of questions. One was
Yes.
about the best model for codification, I think, as well.
But let me ask this question by Joao Victor Cardoso. That is probably one of the, also related with Constitution, with the role of the courts, and then we change to the other topic. Entonces le voy a hacer una pregunta también relacionada con el rol de las cortes, pero ya relacionadas con el poder constituyente. Joao Víctor Cardoso dice, does the book touch the subject of the exercise of the constituent power under constitutional forms? And if so, what is the role of courts in constitutional making? Entonces el rol de las cortes en lo que puede ser la elaboración constitucional, ya no en la reforma, sino en el proceso constituyente.
Yes,
What do you think about that?
This is a fascinating question. I'm writing a paper right now about this problem. So we know about the judicial review of constitutional amendments. But what about the judicial review of original constitutions in the constitution making process? I'm writing a paper about this right now. So it's a fascinating subject to me. There have been instances in the past where the court has actually said that it has the power to review the constitutionality of the Constitution. Sometimes it's been the result of a draft constitution that gives the court the power to review the final constitutional draft. This was the case in South Africa, as you maybe know. This is a famous two-step process where there's an interim constitution. That interim constitution lays out principles that says, when you write the new constitution, that new constitution must respect this list of principles. And then the court has to review the draft constitution to make sure that it respects those constitutional principles. There are also examples of courts that have been given the power as a result of supranational decision-making, the power to review original constitution. To answer the question directly, the book does not discuss the role of courts in reviewing constitution-making processes. This is a current project that I'm working on. But of course, there are two major views in the field about whether courts should have this power. On the one hand, there is a view that the constitution-making process is outside of law, that there should be no barriers, no rules when it comes to the constitution-making process, precisely because it is an exercise of constituent authority. And precisely because the people are supreme and cannot be cabined in their exercise of their constituent authority by a third party. That's one view. Another view is that just because it's an exercise of constitution-making power doesn't mean that there should be no rules. Because of course, we still must respect human rights, civil rights, political rights, and there should be a body responsible for making sure that the Constitution protects rights and doesn't destroy rights. There should be a body that can make sure that there is no lawful slavery, for example, that the Constitution does not make permissible torture, for example. So there are rules on what the people can do. This is the second argument. So the book doesn't discuss this, but this is precisely what I'm working on right now.
Bueno, yo me permito tomar la palabra. Él dice más que él no trabaja esto en el libro. El libro no examina ese ese tema de cuál es el rol de las cortes cuando pues se está elaborando la Constitución. Sin embargo, está trabajando en algún artículo sobre esto. Este es su próximo proyecto, es un tema fascinante. Y entonces él tiene algunos casos, por ejemplo, el caso de Sudáfrica, que lo hemos visto tal vez aquí en alguna charla, y es, bueno, se dieron una constitución interina, 34 principios, y mientras se elaboraba el proyecto de constitución, la Corte Constitucional interina ad hoc empezó a revisar si digamos, el proyecto de constitución se correspondía con esos 34 principios. Entiendo que en 2 o 3 casos se declaró inconstitucionales esos proyectos. Pero él dice, bueno, no trabajo esto en el libro, pero hay 2 posibilidades. Una, de que se diga que el poder constituyente es ilimitado y por lo tanto no está sujeto a ningún control. Y otro es que se diga, sí, el poder constituyente tiene unos límites. Richard también habló, bueno, podría haber otro caso con algún poder supranacional que controle al poder constituyente, pero en el segundo caso, cuando se dice que sí hay límites, se podría pensar, mire, el poder constituyente no puede ir en contra de los derechos humanos, no puede ir en contra de los derechos políticos, de los derechos civiles. Sería inconcebible establecer, por ejemplo, una constituyente que establezca la esclavitud o la tortura, y que está trabajando en ese tema. Entonces, si pasemos al segundo tópico, que ya se nos está acabando el tiempo, si quiere. The second topic will be okay. It's related with, si me recuerdo.
Well, we are going to talk about amendments related to the territory. Specifically, our participants are trying to find out how the Constitution can modify the structure or the very essence of the territorial design. For instance, Bogota and metropolitan area that has been modified during this corona crisis, or the modification of the Mexican Constitution and the name of Ciudad de Mexico. So people want to know what is your position regarding this topic of the Constitution, the territory, and the constitutional amendment.
This is a subject that many people are thinking about, but very few have written about. There is a new book that addresses this subject written by Ron Herschel, and it is called City State, Constitutionalism and the Mega City. It's a very interesting book because in the book, Ron Herschel says, we write about countries, the national government, we write about countries and their subnational governments, provincial governments or state governments, lenders, but we don't write about cities and the relationship of cities to the provincial governments, to the national governments. And the reason why this is a problem, Ron Herschel says, is because some cities are actually bigger, more powerful. They're financial capitals, more powerful than provinces or states. And yet constitutions very rarely devolve powers to them. And so Ron Herschel's book is one that I recommend if you're interested in the design of powers for municipalities in relation to those of the higher levels of government. As to territory more generally, one of the very interesting features of modern constitutions is that they sometimes make rules unamendable. They will say that you can amend everything, but not that. You can amend all of this, but not this. So for example, the Constitution of Turkey says that secularism is unamendable. The Constitution of Brazil says that federalism is unamendable. Well, there are some countries whose constitutions say that the territorial integrity of the state shall be inviolable, that you cannot change the national borders. That is an unamendable rule. very interesting. This happens in France, where Article 89 says that the territorial integrity of the state shall be inviolable. The same rule exists in Ukraine. Ukraine's constitution says that the territorial integrity of the state shall be inviolable. Why is this interesting? It's interesting because, you know what happened a few years ago with the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, into Crimea? This is evidence that texts alone cannot do anything. Texts are not self-enforcing. And so when a constitution says that this is unamendable, national territory, for example, that doesn't mean that it's going to stop political actors from violating the integrity of the state. So you need political will to defend and really enforce what the Constitution says. So for this line of questioning, I would recommend Ron Herschel's book. It's definitely worth reading. And then I would challenge people to think about the limits of codification. When you write something down, it doesn't always end up forcing people to comply and to conform their conduct to it.
Bueno, brevemente, Camila, si me ayudas.
Thank you. There is, bueno, aquí hay pues hay una recomendación para quienes tengan inquietudes o una curiosidad intelectual fuerte respecto a estos temas de reforma constitucional y territorio, y es un libro de Ron Herschel sobre ciudad y estados, donde pues se analiza el rol que tienen muchas ciudades que ya llegan a ser más grandes que los estados en poder económico, poder político, y pues que se deja un poco de lado en el análisis constitucional. Y en segundo lugar tenemos pues algunos ejemplos comparados de disposiciones constitucionales donde el territorio como territorio nacional no se puede modificar, ¿no? Y pues aquí tenemos los ejemplos de Brasil, de Turquía, de Francia y de Ucrania, pero hay un punto, ¿no? Que nos lleva a cuestionar el papel simple de la norma escrita como instrumento vivo, y es el caso de Ucrania, por ejemplo, con la invasión a Crimea en Rusia, pues este conflicto entre Rusia y Ucrania por este territorio, y pues allí el profesor Albert dice, claro, disponer constitucionalmente que es inviolable la integridad del territorio, pues no resulta ser muy efectivo, ¿no? Porque pues al final esto se queda en el papel. Entonces estos son como a grandes rasgos los puntos de la respuesta.
So yes, thank you. Richard, do you want to answer one of the questions? Probably you say that the Codify, Fernando Padilla's question?
Well, I just remember that Maria Camilla mentioned 4 or 5 themes, and one of the themes was about the model of codification. I'm happy to discuss that or something else, whatever you would like.
Fernando Padilla, probably from Mexico, he asks, in your opinion, which is the most appropriate model to codify constitutional amendments?
This is a beautiful question.
Especially in a country like Mexico, whereas where, as you say, there are 100 of amendments since 1917. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a beautiful question. And so thank you for asking it, and thank you for giving me the chance to answer it. Before I do that, Gonzalo, I don't know if Magdalena Correa is here, but please say hi for me, because I mentioned my thanks to Luisa for inviting me to come to Bogota for the first time. But Professor Magdalena Correa, has also invited me many times to come to Bogota, and I'm very grateful to her, and of course to all of my friends at Externado. So please, Gonzalo, remember to say thank you for me and hello.
She's here, and she also have a question. The last question will be hers.
Magdalena is here.
Yeah, she asked about.
Magdalena, okay, great. Okay, well, so let's go to the Mexico question first, which it's a fascinating question. The question is, which model of amendment codification is best? Invisible, integrative, or appendative? My answer is that constitutional designers and constitutional actors should not limit themselves to one model alone. There's no rule that says you have to always use the appenitive model or always use the integrative model or always use the invisible model. You can use one or the other depending on your needs, depending on what you think works best. So for example, if you think that there's something in your original Constitution that is very hateful and exclusionary that you want to really erase, then you use the invisible model. If you want to amend the Constitution in a way that constrains its future interpretation, then perhaps you use the integrative model, because then you know exactly what to change and where, and that will limit the capacity for free interpretation in the future. If you want to authorize courts to determine how an amendment will impact the rest of the Constitution, if you have an amendment that really is going to color everything else in the Constitution, then perhaps you want the appenitive model, because courts will then have to harmonize a new principle with the rest of the Constitution. So there is no reason why any country should adopt one model over the others. They should use one model over another when it's best to do so, when it serves their own purpose to do so. No reason to handcuff yourself to just one model. Use one when it's best for that particular purpose that you have in making the amendment. That's my advice. And for Mexico, I think Mexico needs a consolidation. Mexico needs a huge exercise to rewrite the Constitution, not to remake it, to rewrite it so that things are clearer, so that there is less duplication, so that all of the related subjects are together in the same parts of the Constitution. That's not the case today. Today, the Constitution of Mexico is incoherent. There are inconsistencies in it. There are duplications. Time to get rid of that, I think.
Bueno, Cami, si puedes, porfa.
Oh, thank you, Professor. Bueno, aquí la pregunta básicamente iba dirigida a cuál es el mejor modelo, ¿no? De estos modelos que nos presentó el profesor Albert sobre reforma constitucional, y pues digamos un poco siguiendo la línea de sus respuestas, aquí tampoco hay una verdad absoluta, ¿no? Y estos ingredientes, ¿no?, que nos menciona corresponden a las necesidades de cada sociedad. Y en el caso concreto de México, lo que recomienda el profesor Albert es un proceso de consolidación, ¿no?, que es como lo que él ve necesario allí, no a través como de volver a hacer la Constitución, sino de reescribirla, y reescribirla quiere decir solucionar estos problemas de incoherencia o de repeticiones que existen dentro de la Constitución mexicana, ¿no?, como una forma de acuerdo y de solucionar estos temas de pues, repeticiones y demás. Entonces, eso es.
There is also, Maria Camilla, the point that constitutional designers should not limit themselves to just one of these models. They can use different models as the circumstances warrant, and it's not a problem to do that. You can have different models for different kinds of amendments. Let me also say I thanked Luisa and I thanked Magdalena and the team at Externado, but I've also visited in Colombia, Manizales, and I see that my friend Milton is here. So
Milton is here.
Yeah, I see him. So I want to say thank you to Milton as well, because I've learned from Luisa.
Subamos a Milton,
About,
subamos a todo el mundo.
I've learned from Magdalena and the whole Externado family. And I've also learned from Milton, another host of mine who invited me to Manizales. So it's good to see so many of my friends from Colombia here. Thank you so very much, everyone.
Yes, Richard. So we are going to have all the people here before you finish. And you can see, probably, I don't know if Magdalena wants to open her camera, because, but yes, and ask some question to.
Well, how do I do that? Do I stop my screen? Maybe I should stop my screen.
Okay, will be good. And then, if por favor, Sarita, si puedes subir a todos ya al panel para que.
¿Para la foto? ¿Vas a tomar foto?
Sí, para que los vea
¿Sí?
Richard, que ahí está Milton.
Oh, yes, I would
Ah.
love to see Magdalena, please.
Okay, so I don't know if Magdalena want to.
Oh, there she is.
Magdalena.
Oh, my friend Magdalena, good to see you.
Allá está Axel, bueno, está, no sé, subamos a todos, bueno, van llegando. So I want to ask one question. It's related with the process in Chile. What do you think about that? What do you think about the referendum and all the things that are going on in Chile? ¿Qué piensa él de lo que está pasando en Chile?
Well, I am involved in a number of projects right now. One of my projects is to work with authors who are writing books about constitutional law in Latin America. So I'm involved in a series at Heart Publishing, and one of my co-editors is Carlos Bernal, who just left you in Colombia, those of you who are calling in from Colombia, and came here to the United States. As you know, he left the court. But he and I and a third colleague, Caterina Botello, are working with interested authors to write books and publish books on Latin American constitutions. And we have just been in touch with a group of scholars who are going to be writing a book about the Chilean constitutional process. I'm very excited about it. I'm following it very, very closely. I think that the process is going to take a long time, and we risk getting impatient, but I think it's worth the wait, because it's a very clear process every step of the way in order to get popular input, to get popular participation, and also to give time. This is very important, to give time to people to be informed about what is happening. One of the risks when you go fast is that people just don't have the time to learn and to pay attention to what is happening, to what is being proposed in their name. I don't know if that will be the case in Chile, because they're taking so much time to do this very carefully. This actually gives me great confidence about the outcome in Chile, that when they replace the Constitution finally, that people will be able to be proud of it. That's my hope. We'll see if that happens. But I think that they are doing it in a way that will, more likely than not, generate a constitution that people are well informed about, that people are supportive of, and that people can really see themselves and their aspirations reflected in. So that's my reaction right now to what's happening in Chile. I have very high hopes for the process. I have some colleagues who are involved very closely in there, and I'd love to continue learning more about it. And that's what I'm doing. I read as much as I can about it.
Bueno, Cami, si puedes traducir un poquito y le damos la palabra a la jefa para que nos diga algo también.
Bueno, digamos, hay un punto aquí, es un poco relacionado con una respuesta anterior, y son los procesos de información, ¿no? En estos procesos constituyentes. Y pues acá el profesor Albert dice, pues que claro, esto es un proceso muy emocionante, que de hecho él está trabajando en esto con Carlos Bernal, pues a través de una publicación, y que para él hay como 3 ingredientes principales para el éxito de este proceso constituyente, que pues a él le emociona bastante, y es, bueno, uno, el nivel de información que tiene la población sobre lo que están decidiendo por ella, ¿no? 2, como el nivel de apoyo que estas reformas tienen, pues estas decisiones tienen sobre la gente, ¿no? Y pues por último, el tiempo, ¿no? El tiempo, la calidad de la discusión que se da en base a estos 2 ingredientes. Entonces, de acuerdo a esta mezcla, pues podemos tener como éxito, y pues es un proceso, por supuesto, muy valioso y emocionante. Thank you, Professor
Thank
Albert.
you very much. And thank you, Maria Camilla, for mentioning the book series. I would love to have conversations with any of you who are interested in writing a book on some part of Latin American constitutionalism. This is one of the most exciting disciplines in the study of constitutional law today. There's so much happening in that area. So if you're writing something, please let me know and we can see if we can help you publish it. I'm glad that we're now in the panel. We can see each other. I can see some friends. I recognize some names. Thank you so much. I see Milton there. Hi, Milton. I remember when I came to Manizales, I had a delicious dinner at Milton's mom's house. We went to his house.
To repeat it.
Oh, it was so good. I had 2 plates and his mom made a delicious meal for us. It was so good. Oh, I can't wait to come back to see all of my friends in Colombia.
With frijoles, no, Milton? Frijoles? With beans, no?
Sí, pero paisas.
Bandeja
Beans.
paisa.
Beans, chicharrón.
Pork skin.
And delicious
yes.
chicken. I remember. Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
Bueno,
Greetings, dear friend. Thank you.
Bueno verte, Milton, acá reunidos. Bueno, Richard nos invita a que escribamos en su colección que está dirigiendo con Catarina Santos Botelo y Carlos Bernal Pulido en Heart, ¿verdad? Y para que pues ellos están dirigiendo esta colección para que el que quiera enviar algo, ellos están dispuestos. Saben que Richard Albert se ha convertido pues en todo, digamos, un promotor del derecho constitucional comparado en el mundo. Entonces tiene muchos proyectos, va a ser codirector de ICON, ahora es secretario, está en el proyecto de HART y tiene pues todas estas redes de amigos que lo queremos bastante. Vamos a dar la palabra a la doctora Magdalena Correa, directora del Departamento de Derecho Constitucional.
Gonzalito always does that thing to oblige me to talk everywhere.
Well, everyone wants to hear from you, so he's right. Yes. He wants to give the people what the people want.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Richard, for being always with us. You have a very nice person with Latin American scholars in Colombia, in Externado, in Universidad de Caldas. This has been so nice, and you are a big example for everybody to work hard for our ideals. And also to Gonzalito, for everybody, all these people I see always following what we do and what Gonzalito does, and Manuela and Maria Camila and our friends Lisa Fernanda. Thank you, everybody. I don't know if I can ask a question. I would like to ask 2 questions, if it is possible. The first one, in Colombia, we have the problem that we always think to reform, to amend the Constitution, instead to amend law. Many things we have here that we have a good Constitution, but what we don't have is good laws to develop the ideals and the values and the principles and the rules of the Constitution. Do you have one idea how to explain to our legislators when is really necessary to reform the Constitution instead to reform laws? That will be the first. And the other one is perhaps is behind something that you said. Could be say that there is one implicit principle against retrogressive amendments. I mean, amendments that diminish democracy, institutions, rights, liberties. Could we say that constitutional law or constitutional theory is against this retrogressive amendments, could be said?
Two very good questions, difficult questions, but important questions, Magdalena, and so good to see you. Thank you so very much for all of your hospitality and your generosity to me personally. The first question about treating the Constitution really as a statute. Amendments are made to the Constitution when it's more appropriate to change ordinary law. This is a problem that many countries are facing. Many countries face this problem. I call it a problem because I think it undermines the integrity of the Constitution. When you put things in the Constitution that aren't Constitution level, that don't have constitutional significance, that dilutes the Constitution. When you put things in the Constitution that should be better put in ordinary law, that's a problem. But there's a reason why it happens. There's a reason why political actors do this all over the world. It happens, I guess, in Colombia, happens in Mexico, it happens all around the world. It even happened almost in Canada recently. The reason is that political actors want to entrench their policy preferences in the Constitution, and they want to insulate them from invalidation by ordinary legislative majorities. So it's no surprise that you see political actors, when they have a dominant majority in the Congress or the Parliament, enough to make an amendment, that they will actually pursue ordinary legislative change at the level of the Constitution, precisely to insulate it from future change and repeal from the opposition. So I think this is why they do it. I don't think it's a good idea to do it, because public policy should not be in a constitution. We should reserve that for the structure of government, for rights, for principles. But of course, this is an aspirational view from a scholar, right? Not the view of someone who is doing battle in politics. And so I understand why political actors do this, but I don't think it's right. Still, I don't think it's possible to convince them to do anything differently, because unless politics changes to be more collaborative, more trustworthy, more responsible, this is what you're going to see in the years ahead. We see it in Mexico, see it in Colombia, we see it in my home country, Canada, we see it all around the world. I just think we need a new culture of politics in order to do that. The second question, Magdalena, was about retrogressive amendments. Should there be, is there a kind of a higher law that should limit the use of the amendment power to undermine rights, violate rights, to engage in what people have called constitutional retrogression? I think sadly, my answer is no. Not only is there no such rule, but I don't think there should be any such rule, because those rules are going to be written by someone. They have to be written at some supranational level. And I'm not sure that we will be happy always with who is running these supranational entities. It may be that today your views align with the supranational governors, but that may not always be the case. Moreover, when a constitution is subject to supranational rules, that I think undermines the Constitution. A constitution for me is a distinctly national set of rules, not supranational, not regional, but national. It reflects the views, the hopes, the fears, the aspirations of the people of a particular jurisdiction. When we go higher than the country, the state, to a supranational governance, that I think raises some problems, because then there's a risk of really eviscerating borders, not recognizing that there are different values that people regard as appropriate and as their own in their own country. And it also, I think, undermines the very nature of a constitution. A constitution for me is the product of a very specific equation of people, of time, and of place that come together to define themselves as they wish to be defined. Supranational laws, I think, undermine that, and that's not something that I think is good for a country.
Ay, sí, María Camila nos ayuda.
Oh, that's
Sí,
a
se me
lot.
fue madre.
That's a lot, Maria Camila. I'm
Sí,
sorry.
sí. Con las dos ideas centrales.
Bueno,
Ya nos acaba el tiempo.
vamos a empezar por el final, ¿no? Digamos, la segunda pregunta, digamos, tiene que ver un poco con estos ingredientes, ¿no? Y el papel de este derecho supranacional, la Constitución, otras normas. Y pues al final del día, pues la Constitución para el profesor Albert resulta ser el eje central, ¿no? Y lo que refleja ese deseo de una población, una jurisdicción determinada, digamos, mezclando tres elementos de las personas o la población, el tiempo, ¿no? Y ese lugar o espacio determinado. Entonces, a partir de allí es que nosotros tenemos como esa norma central que nos permite como autogestionarnos y ve muy problemática la idea de esa combinación de ese derecho supranacional o de normas, digamos, de más alto rango, si así quiere llamarse, ¿no? Respecto de la primera pregunta, un poco relacionada con las demás fuentes dentro de nuestro sistema de normas y la Constitución, digamos, este papel de la política pública, digamos, allí pues necesitamos como rescatar, ¿no? Este rol de la Constitución, ¿no? Como este eje central, ¿no? No delegar, digamos, la creación de otras normas, ¿no? Porque al final la esencia misma de esta gestión de gobierno, esta gestión de nuestros asuntos públicos, está en este pilar, en esta norma fundamental y no, digamos, en otros ejes de política que de repente nos pueden ayudar a gestionar bien nuestros asuntos, pero no van a ser ese núcleo central, la nuez del asunto. Creo que con esto, pues, es como un poco la manera en que podría condensar estas ideas que el profesor Albert nos presenta con mucha generosidad. Thank you.
so
Bueno,
much.
thank you very much.
Gonzalo, can I ask a favor of you?
Yes, of course.
I would like to just hear who is here and where they are and perhaps something that what they're.
Yes, if
Is
you
that
have
possible?
time, we are delighted to
Just an introduction, is that
you have
possible?
an introduction. No, it's possible. My name is Gonzalo Ramirez. I'm from Colombia. Bueno, ¿quién quiere presentarse? Empiecen. Somos 24 personas que quieren presentarse, contarles un poco qué hacen.
I know it's getting late, but I don't want to keep people too long. Just a word about who they are. I recognize many of these names. I recognize many names. I see Galimberti, I see Javier, I see Pedro. I recognize many names. It'd be good just to see.
So, Manuel, sigue.
Hi, Richard. I'm Manuel Garcia Mancilla from Argentina. I'm the Dean of the Law School at the Universidad Austral. And I was looking forward to...
Oh, thank you, Dean. Thank you, Dean Manuel. Thank you so very much.
Universidad Austral es en Buenos Aires? ¿Es en Buenos Aires? Or?
Yes, it
Okay.
is in Buenos Aires.
Nice to meet you, Manuel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, great to have you here.
Axel.
Hi, Mr. Albert. We are very delighted with your presentation. I'm very interested in the issues of territorial planning and constitutional changes. Very grateful by your reference to Rand Hirschel. We are very connected with that topic. Thank you for all.
Thank you very much, Axel.
Professor Imer Flores from UNAM.
Hi, Richard. This is Imer Flores. I am at UNAM in Mexico City, the National University. I'm in the Legal Research Institute and the Law School, and I have been around in the ICON and several places. And I like very much the topic of constitutional change and also the checking of the constitutional changes. So I will send you an email soon.
Oh, please, thank you very much. And I know many people at UNAM, so thank you so very much for being here.
And I know I can see that you're familiar with the project of the consolidation of the text, but we need to talk much more on that.
Ah, okay, yes. I cite this project in my book, in fact.
Galimberti.
Hello, Richard, everyone. Galimberti from Puno, Peru. I enjoyed reading your book. That's amazing. I hope we will talk about that after.
Yes, thank you, Galimberti, from Peru.
Yeah, Peru.
Is Joao Victor Cardoso?
Hi, thank you very much to Externado, and it's a pleasure to talk to professors as you all, and most Professor Richard. I am a PhD student, and I'm Brazilian, and I am engaged to a Chilean. So I'm living in Chile and doing my PhD in the University of Chile in a double degree modality with the University of São Paulo. And I'm working on the exercise of the constituent power under constitutional forms. I made the question on the role of courts in constitution making. So thank you very much.
Oh, great. Thank you so very much for being here.
Javier Marin, who is a student from our master. Javier, ¿está por ahí?
Yeah, maybe people we don't have to force them.
Yes.
No need to do that.
Okay, who wants to introduce us?
Hi, everyone. Pleased to meet you. I'm Javier Marin, a student for the master degree in Constitutional Law in Externado University.
Oh,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Javier. Good to meet you. Thank you.
It is Héctor Hernán Pinzón. I don't know, Juan Sebastián Oñate.
Can you hear me? No?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. I don't have a camera, but thank you so much for the class. I'm Juan Sebastián Lopez. I'm just a law student in Externado. I used to be a student of Dr. Gonzalo here.
Sí, yes. Y está
Thank you.
José Vega, está Lorena, está Pedro Caminos, no sé. Pedro se fue.
Oh, yes, I recognize Lorena's name. Yes.
Ahí está Pedro.
And Pedro, yes.
Hi, Richard. Nice seeing you. I enjoy very much your presentation. And hi, Gonzalo. Thank you for hosting.
Hi, Pedro.
Thank you very much,
Rosemary
Pedro.
Baez, Romeo, Laura, Lorena, no sé. Lorena, si estás por ahí.
Thank you. Well, this has been really great. Gonzalo, you have organized a wonderful series over the summer. And for me, it's an honor to be part of this series and to have a chance to exchange ideas with you and to meet all of you. I've known many of you either in person or by name. So I look forward to when it's safe for us to travel again and we can be together at conferences or workshops. I am involved in ICONS, and so hopefully we can travel next year to Poland and see each other then.
Yes, we also want to say something about the global summit that you organized in January. I don't know if, okay, here is the global summit that we are forward to go in January 12 to 16. Richard is organizing this global summit that will be in internet. Can you explain a little bit about this global summit?
I am happy to do that, and thank you so much, Gonzalo, for mentioning that. I had no idea you're going to mention this. This is great. So I am working, if you scroll down a little bit, I'm working with a team to organize the very first multilingual, multi-time zone conference in the world virtually, so that you can present your papers and learn from others. You can present your papers or ideas in any language you want. We have 6 languages: Chinese, French, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, and of course also English. You can either present an idea, you can present a paper, or you can just come and attend and watch online. We will record all of the sessions, and all of the sessions will be available to you after the conference for a limited period of time, I think a month or 2 months. So you can go back and watch all of the sessions that you may have missed. And you can also watch your own panel if you're on a panel. If you scroll down a little bit more, Gonzalo, you will see that there are plenary speakers. So I've invited 12 people to make plenary lectures. These are some great scholars, some that you've heard of and some that you probably have not. But this is an effort to give a platform to people all around the world so we can exchange ideas and have a good time learning about constitutional law from different perspectives: comparative, doctrinal, historical, theoretical, philosophical. I'm very excited about this program. Now, if you are unable to register with the registration fee, we can give you financial assistance. So that's no problem at all. So you can just let us know about that. But the deadline is October 1 to register, either with a paper or a fully formed panel. And then we will let you know that you've been accepted, and then you have to do one more step. But if there's a problem with the registration fee, don't worry about it. Just let me know, and then we'll help you with that. But you're all invited to participate. Thank you so much, Gonzalo, for mentioning this. I was not expecting you to do that, but I'm grateful to you.
We are grateful with you and all your ideas. Thank you very much to make all this possible to gather all the people around the world talking about these topics. The last thing is taking a picture. If you want, if someone wants to open the camera and take a picture.
How do we do that?
Sarah is going to take the picture. Sarah is behind all the work. I want to thank Maria Camila, Luisa, Fernanda, and also Sarah Brochet, who is helping with, Manuela Lozada, who is helping me with all the technical stuff. And Sarita is going to take a picture. So if you want to open the camera and
do we get a 1, 2, 3 a countdown, or how do we know when the photo is taken?
Sarita.
Yes, I'll do it.
1, 2, 3, or cheese, or what?
Oh, look at Magdalena with her cat.
Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, this is great. Everyone, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I'm so grateful to you for this invitation. Had a good time chatting with you, and I hope everyone stays safe, you and your loved ones. And I look forward to seeing you in person when it's possible. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard, for everything.
Gracias, Gonzalo.
Luis, a todos, María Camila, Manuel.
Gracias a todos.
Thank you, Manuela.
Genial.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Maria Camila, everyone. Thank you so very much.
Bueno, chao, los invitamos para el próximo martes y los estaremos informando. Va a ser sobre México, va a estar Alejandro Wong y Soraya Pérez, y entonces será una de las tantas que haremos de México. Después haremos otras, ojalá con Imer, que lo veo ahí. Poco a poco haremos, y todos los que quieran me dicen para participar. Chao, gracias por todo.
Gracias, Gonzalo. Gracias
Chao,
a todos.
felicitaciones, muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Adiós. Que estén bien.
Gracias, María Camila.
Gracias, Luisa, que te vaya bien.
Hasta luego, gracias.